welcome back to the channel and thank you for watching. I felt like I wanted to address a couple of emails that I've received recently about the same issue, coincidentally, and so without naming names. These emails spoke of Dr. Curry and her evidence, and in some sense or another in each of these emails questioning whether she was mistaken in her testimony about Amber Heard, whether she was honest about her testimony in respect of Amber Heard. And so I wanted to make one or two comments generally and refer to a video that I've done previously, because I previously had an expert guest of my own on this channel. You may remember Dr. Das. I will link him in the description below. A fantastic fellow that I've had on this channel more than once. He is a consultant forensic psychiatrist and is regularly instructed in various different cases to give his expert opinion on mental disorders and conditions and so on. And indeed, I had him on this channel to discuss whether or not an expert could be trusted and whether an expert's evidence is in any way tainted, or the general quality of the evidence that they give. And so before going to that very short clip of that video, which I will also link in full in the description below, I thought I would make a few comments generally about experts and the duty to the court and so on, beginning quite fittingly with that of a barrister's duty to the court and indeed any lawyer's duty to the court. So all lawyers have, regardless of your jurisdiction, have a set of rules or code of conduct, or however it's referred to, that need to be followed by each lawyer. For the Bar of England and Wales, this is contained within the Bar Standards Board Handbook, which contains what used to be called the Code of Conduct, and it's still referred to as a Code of Conduct. And within it, there are certain duties, which are paramount duties that every barrister must follow. The first of which, and there are many, many rules about this, but the first of which is a duty to the court, and that is that the barrister must uphold their duty to the court at all times. And essentially what that means is that the barrister cannot mislead the court. The barrister has a duty to ensure smooth operations of justice within the court system, and cannot allow the court to be misled in one way or another. There are various other duties that interact and overlap with this duty. For example, there is a duty to the client to act in the client's best interests. There is also a duty to maintain the client's confidentiality. There's a duty to remain independent and free of any bias. Now, the duty to the court is not overridden by the duty to confidentiality to the client, but also the barrister is not obliged to breach the confidentiality of the client just to meet that duty of the court. So what would happen there is, if there is a risk that the court has been or will be misled, and the only way of avoiding that would be to tell the court something that the client does not wish, the barrister cannot simply override the confidentiality of the client in order to meet the duty to the court, but what the barrister must do is withdraw from that case. So there's lots of rules about this, and so that duty to the court is not overridden by the duty of confidentiality to the client, and vice versa. So they work in tandem. So the barrister must uphold the duty to the court and uphold the duty of confidentiality to the client, and of course, if they are incompatible, the barrister must withdraw from the case. With all that said, every expert also swears an oath to be truthful and to provide good evidence to the court. This goes for any evidence of any kind giving evidence in court for the purposes of a case. Now, as I've said many times before, your opinions and your emotions don't matter for the most part. Your emotions matter in certain cases. For example, if you need to show a fear of harm in a particular criminal event, and your opinions might matter if you're an expert or you have sufficient experience in the field. For example, I am a qualified martial arts expert. I'm a 6th degree black belt in multiple martial arts. I've trained for over 30 years. If I were called to give evidence in an expert capacity as a martial artist, I could do so. There's no specific court qualification, as it were, to go and give expert evidence in a court. It is simply that you are an expert in that field. Much like a master builder would be an expert to give an expert opinion on the quality of building, and therefore there are various qualifications and certifications and accreditations and so on and so forth, all of whom must give their evidence to the court properly and accurately, and to do otherwise would be contempt of court. So this duty to the court is paramount, regardless whether you're a barrister, a solicitor, an advocate, an attorney, whatever jurisdiction you are in, there will be an equivalent, and the same goes for experts. So with all that said, any expert in the case of a potential mental or medical assessment will need to give that evidence to the court in exactly the same way. So to that end, I did bring onto my channel, in the video that I will link in the description below, Dr. Shaham Das, who is a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I'm very pleased he's now gone past 30,000 subscribers, but please let's get him more subscribers, because if you really want to delve into the mindset of criminality and why people do what they do, and whether they have or do not have in some circumstances a mental condition that makes them do that, check out Dr. Das's channel. It's called A Psych for Sore Minds. Now, I'll bring you to the small snippet of the video that he kindly joined me on to talk about this very issue of experts. And in doing so, we did discuss very briefly, it's a long video, but we in brief discussed the experts in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial in Virginia. Both Dr. Spiegel and Dr. Curry very briefly. So to that end, I'm going to move to that video now, and you will see very briefly those comments by Dr. Das here. I'll play those for you now. Just very briefly then, bringing it back to the Depp Heard trial, was there anything in either of those expert witnesses in the way that they handled questions that you felt they didn't do very well or could have done better, or the approach to their evidence generally?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked in our previous video about Dr. Spiegel. He's the one that stands out. So he is a consultant psychiatrist. I think he might have even been a forensic psychiatrist. You'll have to double check that. And he was very defensive. So when anybody questioned that there might be another perspective to what he was saying, or another opinion, the correct approach would have been, yes, there are different ways to look at it, but with the evidence that I have, this is the way that I would make my conclusions. Whereas what he did is he almost kind of raised his eyebrows in a sarcastic way and kind of shrugged, and basically made this inference that even asking the question in itself was unfair and was not sensible. And I'm pretty sure at one point he even asked, I can't remember what the question was, but one of the lawyers asked him a question, and he just kind of shrugged and laughed it off. And then he looked at the judge and he kind of said, do I have to answer this? And then the judge got a little bit irritated with him and said something like, yes, you're expected to answer every question that's asked of you. So I think he tried to get the judge on his side by suggesting that the question was ridiculous, but in fact got kind of chastised in front of everybody. So yeah, that stands out.
Yeah, it's interesting you say, because that's certainly one thing that stood out to me. Whereas on the other hand, Dr. Curry's evidence, in my view, although she was fairly robustly tested, but in my view stood up very well. You don't have to agree with my assessment, but do you have the assessment of Dr. Curry, or would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I would. I did see a video with her, and I have to admit it was a few weeks ago, and the very fact that I can't remember that much from it, to me, suggests that it must have been quite solid evidence, because I was looking for mistakes that I could exploit and make YouTube videos about, and I couldn't find any. So yeah, I would agree. One thing that...
So there you have it. Speaking with Dr. Shaham Das, said he was watching and looking for mistakes that he could potentially use to create YouTube videos about. Indeed, either of us could make videos either way round to look for mistakes, potential mistakes, or things that we could use to deliver to you as education, entertainment, or whichever that you come to these videos for. and Dr. Das said that he couldn't find any such mistakes. So I wanted really to reiterate some of the thoughts that I had. And in watching Dr. Curry's testimony over 2 days that she gave evidence for, or at least 2 days, I think, she referred in many parts to an MMPI-2 test, which was a test administered when it was a self-report by Amber Heard. And this test was designed to pick up whether or not there were either deliberate or even unconscious bias responses to some of the questions, whether she was either over or under exaggerating certain responses, either to show one thing deliberately or to not show something deliberately. And one of the comments that stands out in my recollection in Dr. Curry's evidence was that one such condition of PTSD is one of the easiest to fake. So if someone were given a list of sort of responses or symptoms that someone with PTSD might exhibit, people can reproduce that 96% of the time, which I thought was quite fascinating, even as a lawyer myself. I thought that quite fascinating that somebody could reproduce this so accurately and effectively. And yet this test is designed to pick up on whether they are conscious or unconscious actions or biases or responses by the person being administered with this test and the self-report. So one of the emails, and I'm never going to name names when someone sends me an email to say, take a look at the evidence by Dr. Curry, and perhaps there might be some evidence of wrongdoing here. Dr. Das, if you watch the video, does go on to say that he didn't agree if Dr. Curry had gone to a dinner engagement and so on and so forth. He didn't agree that that was right. I made the comment that that doesn't automatically make somebody biased. I know that some people have made such comments about potentially about the judge in the UK trial and family members. And again, I've said that I wouldn't automatically link that to any kind of bias. Some people have done in comments that I've read online, but I would not jump to that conclusion for the simple reason that quite the reverse, in fact, during our training, and I'm sure it's the same in the medical profession as it is in the legal profession. In fact, I know it is because I've spoken to some doctors that have done exactly this. We go to various engagements and seminars and dinners and all of these sort of things, these events where we are encouraged to sit, mingle, talk, eat and drink together and just have these events and have these meals together. In fact, at the bar, to be called to the Bar of England and Wales, we have what we call qualifying sessions, which includes a minimum number. The number has reduced in recent years, but a minimum number of events that you must attend. They used to be called the dinners. They were literally just limited to dinner engagements with other barristers and other judges. Now they have expanded quite considerably into various training elements and even, believe it or not, acting and drama sessions, because in one way or another you could look at a performance in a courtroom as being akin to drama as it is to law, because it is all about how the case is portrayed, and therefore having confidence of voice and projection and so on are important factors in delivering a case, not just understanding the law. So the point is, having been to these dinner engagements, if I were to come before a judge on a real case that I have once or more than once sat beside, chatting, eating and drinking, that's not going to make either of us in even the slightest bit biased about the case, because we know each other. Even if it was someone in chambers together, if two barristers or barrister became a judge and then is in court with a barrister with whom they were once at chambers, there is no real prospect of bias in those situations. It's not to say that it's impossible. It's not to say that it will never happen. But it would be so extremely rare that we would never automatically go to that frame of mind when considering the independence of any barrister or any expert giving evidence. Bearing in mind the rules in the Code of Conduct, if anyone were to be accused or seen to be lacking in their independence or their confidentiality of the client and so on, they would risk their professional career. So even in a case where, if I had a friend which was a very close friend of mine and with whom I've exchanged gifts or so on, if that were a close friendship, I would not accept instructions from that friend, because it would risk the perception that I've compromised my independence. If it was a friend that I'm not so acquainted with, just now and again that we've met up and so on, that might be okay, but it's always a question of judgment, and it is always a question of perception, because it is not just about whether you are seen to be independent, it is also whether you are seen to be independent. So whether you are and whether you are seen to be independent. But that's not to be confused with simply having been at dinner or having some sort of formal professional relationship with that person, or even if that does spill into some kind of friendship. For example, we know many other barristers at the bar and we form some kind of friendship with those barristers, but there is no question, I would hope, certainly not in my mind and not in the mind of anyone that I know, not in any of our mind, that there'd be any question over our independence. And I would say that applies to experts as well. I have friends who give expert evidence in court, and I would not for a moment think that they would jeopardize their professional career by any kind of compromise to their independence. So I thought this video was worth doing just to go over those few points, and as I say, I'll link that video in the description below. You can go and watch that, and the rest of Dr. Das's comments about Dr. Curry and Dr. Spiegel. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope that has addressed some of the questions that more than one person has sent by email about Dr. Curry and their evidence. I hope you found it useful. Please do like the video and subscribe so that YouTube will spread this video around further and wider. And big hello to all of those of you that I've seen on my travels just recently. It's great to meet you out and about. And as always, thank you for watching.